Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video on the 8th anniversary of the 2016 Brexit referendum, where we voted to amputate both our feet and for good measure put Boris Johnson in charge of the operation. So 8 years on, none of the Brexit promises have been borne out. All of the Brexit warnings are now clear. Polling shows a clear and consistent majority regretting the decision. And remember that polls are actually skewed towards Leave supporters a bit. How? Because when pollsters are mapping their survey results onto what they think is the general shape of the population, they still seem to be working on the assumption that we're split 52-48 Leave to Remain. But of course, due to the extremely lopsided nature of the vote across age ranges, a vastly disproportionate number of Leave supporters have died since then, and a vastly disproportionate number of pro-EU people are now old enough to vote. However, despite all this, there is still no clear path as to what to do. Leave supporters keep insisting we just need to give it more time, or they believe Farage that it was just handled badly and it can still work, which is rubbish, of course. If competence were a factor, then why didn't the likes of Farage publish a roadmap for how Brexit should work? Why has he still not done this? The reason is because Brexit did exactly what it was intended to do. It has made a load of his mates and associates very rich. There are only two failures of Brexit as far as the likes of Farage are concerned. First, they thought they'd ushered in this ideological golden age where, guided by the unholy Brexit, the government would pick apart all of our rights and regulations, with the opposition continuing to be in disarray. We'd be taken back to feudal days where the already rich became even richer and more powerful. Jacob Rees-Mogg tried to kickstart this with his retained EU law bill, for example, and then more would have come. Farage would have earned a lot of very powerful favours. But it was all too quick, too reckless, too incompetent. People noticed the rapid drop in their living standards. Labour and the Lib Dems actually started to take elections seriously again. As a result, the Conservatives have spent the last 3 years completely wasting their large parliamentary majority. Because think about what they've done. With that large majority, what did they do? They did take us out of the EU. What else have they done with it? Apart from making it more difficult to protest against them, what have they actually done with their power since 2021? Nothing. They've been reacting to their decline in the polls and announcing ever increasingly insane policies as a way of trying to reassert their polling dominance, but never actually doing anything. Which is a good thing for us, because what they wanted to do was even more damaging to the country. Second Brexit misfire was arguably the intended disunity it was supposed to create in Europe. It is a fact that Russia had long had a foreign policy objective of splitting Europe up in order to make it easier to invade, and they made no secret of the fact that the UK was the weakest link in the chain. The Russian government were terribly pleased with the Brexit vote. There are some who think Putin only ordered his full-scale invasion of Ukraine because he thought Brexit had given him enough cover. He'd lost the orange one in America, but he thought Brexit would just about help. Now, I don't think there's any real proof of this. However, if the Russian government did think that Brexit would at least help against a united response against him, then they miscalculated. It was quite a spectacular miscalculation, in fact. Boris Johnson, who took vast sums of money from Kremlin-backed oligarchs, got drunk with Russian agents as Foreign Secretary just after the Kremlin had carried out a deadly attack on a British citizen on British soil, and someone who put a Kremlin-backed oligarch into our own parliament against the strongest objections of our security services. This man, this traitor to his country, this Russian asset, had to put on a new persona immediately, no equivocation. That of the champion of Ukraine against Russian aggression. The mask has slipped once or twice, of course, such as his support for Trump winning this year's presidency, when Trump intends to withdraw all support for Ukraine the second he's back in power. But Johnson has had to play this new role with such gusto that even people in Ukraine think he cares about them. You look at the front page of the Mail on Sunday today. As usual, there's no news about the general election because for weeks now they don't really know what to make of it. But they're attacking Farage. The Mail on Sunday is attacking Farage because of his continued pushing of the Kremlin attack lines that the invasion was the fault of NATO or the EU or both. And that's where it is. That was the miscalculation. The miscalculation that the UK would side with Russia against the EU and wider Europe as an enemy of my enemy is my friend. But as it turned out, actually, even Brexiteers in this country would rather be friends with the EU than with Putin. You know, as a result of the full-scale invasion, even the Conservative government started to work much more closely with the EU. And everything is set up for a much more fruitful dialogue to get started on July the 5th. So stepping back in terms of the big things that the main architects of Brexit wanted, Britain becoming a pirate haven and Russia carving up Eastern Europe, they've both fallen flat. So in a sense, everyone lost. But we still feel no closer to a definite path out of it. Leave voters insist we try doing it properly, whatever that means. Rejoiners want to join the EU again, myself included, but don't know how. Said before, I'm a supporter of people barracking politicians to join the EU or at least the Single Market and Customs Union, but it won't work. Not in terms of getting them to go, oh, all right, then we'll do that. Because it's not because we need politicians to say that. They can't say that. They can't do it. It's not legally or politically possible. Not yet, anyway. The reason I support it is because it's the only way to get a dialogue. The media should be leading the dialogue, but they're not doing. Even The Guardian, or on Sundays, The Observer, as it's called. The Observer front page today says Starmer's growth plan doomed without access to EU markets. And you think, well, at least they're trying to talk properly about Brexit, something that's been missing from this election campaign. But they're not. The article has been roundly panned by actual trade experts. It is just as irresponsible as the Daily Express posting an article about how the Brexit problems we have are caused by EU mean-spiritedness rather than our own choices to diverge. Only worse in some case, because it's easy to see the ridiculousness of the Express's position. Essentially what the pro-Brexit papers say is a variation on this theme. We should have completely divergent rules and systems to the EU. What do you mean we're stuck in queues because we've got completely divergent rules and systems to the EU? Easy to spot the flaw in that logic. But the article's calling for us to just join the single market, as if it's like flicking a switch. That's worse. You know, we think leaving the single market and customs union created all these economic problems. So why don't we just rejoin? The Treasury is taking £50 billion a year less as a direct result of this, which is something I would say to any Tory or Brexiteer complaining about VAT on private school fees or closing off tax avoidance schemes or even raising capital gains tax if Labour choose to do that. I would respond, well, you cost our Treasury £50 billion in revenue a year for public spending because of your pointless Brexit. So until you've got a plan to recoup that money some other way, you can sit down and shut up. But the natural inclination is to say, look, we should just rejoin. If leaving was the problem, we should just rejoin. But we don't qualify. Starmer's made the point again that the issue is too raw, that people don't want the Brexit arguments blowing back up again. And this is true. And it's a counter to people who conceded that we can't actually join, but maybe if we just said that we want that direction of travel, that would help. It won't. I have to admit, I didn't fully appreciate the scale of that hurt myself 5 years ago. I knew that Brexit had divided families and friendships really very badly. That was evident. I didn't appreciate just how long-lasting those scars were going to be. The sudden drop in saliency in the polls on Brexit matters after we left has helped persuade me of this. It's why I support Labour just fixing things behind the scenes, quietly, without fuss. Boring, so the papers can't really get a handle on reporting it. You know, yes, at some point we are going to have to approach those red lines. But what people often miss is this is what actual trade experts keep pointing out. There's actually a load of schemes out there for countries outside the customs union single market, which exist to cover some of the benefits. I've talked about the Pan-European Mediterranean Convention. You are definitely going to be hearing more about this with Labour in government. There are lots of other things as well. And above all, we have to remember that we do not even qualify for rejoining anything until the issue is politically settled. While it is possible for a future election to return a government that doesn't want us in the EU or in the customs union or in the single market, we do not even qualify to apply to join, much less actually join. And people should understand that. Ukraine is in the process of joining, despite the fact it obviously can't complete the process whilst invaded. And that is because it is politically settled there. Nobody seriously believes that a future Ukrainian government would change that. The country is in favour of membership. The same is not true in the UK. And until it is, and we can only measure it in terms of the policies of parties who can realistically form a government, then all Labour can do by even talking about rejoining is restart old battles, reopen old wounds, and also cause a lot of unnecessary attention on what they're trying to do behind the scenes. Which all sounds a bit grim. Have the Brexiteers actually won? Are we trapped? No, far from it. It's just that we're not looking at the right pathway out of here. For a start, Brexit groups are fighting just as ferociously for their cause now. Some of this could be, as I suggested, because they never really got what they wanted from it. But part of it is because they do feel their project is threatened. Despite what they say, they know that public opinion is mostly against Brexit. They do fear another referendum at some point in the future. There's every chance that public opinion is going to continue to move against Brexit. That's a threat to them, and they believe that. I've discussed this before, but the pathway that most appeals to me doesn't technically exist yet. It was kicked off by Macron, but France and Germany are both supporting a sort of second tier of membership. Now, because it doesn't exist yet, and political instability in France in particular could easily derail it, we don't know the details, but the direction of travel is it's sort of like a way of joining, effectively from a practical point of view, joining the single market. Something that doesn't currently exist without a bespoke deal that not a single country in the world has. The idea is that some countries in Europe want to be in the EU for economic reasons. We were one of them, if we're honest. It was the economic reasons. And they want access to the single market, but it creates friction on the political alignment that some are not totally sold on. Now, if this takes shape and becomes a prospect by the end of the decade, I could see that being sold to the UK. First of all, it's a brand new concept. It wasn't on offer at any point during the Brexit years, so nobody could say it was rejected as an option. Second, it's access to markets without political alignment, exactly what Brexiteers claim they want. More importantly, it's what those who've had bust-ups with family and friends could potentially go, oh, if only we'd been offered this in the first place, that's exactly what we wanted. Third, perhaps a Conservative Party waking up from its madness in a few years might see that this is the path of least resistance. Oh, this is the reform that David Cameron wanted. Oh, right, yeah, this is what we wanted. Oh, this is fine. Now, the purpose of this project is really for helping like Eastern European countries, mostly like Ukraine, who would benefit from stable economic growth. The EU want to give them that stable economic growth really quickly, but which could come via single market membership, but they're not ready for the political alignment for much longer. But it would also potentially be a huge boon to the UK as well, because we're largely in the same boat. Obviously, we'll have to decide that freedom of movement's not actually a problem for us, but there'd be a few years to do that anyway. And for those who think this sounds like it was just going to take too long, there are businesses going under right now, and they don't have that time. That's true, but there is no alternative which is quicker. Like I said, even if we had a government which just said, do you know what, we should join the EU, it would take a decade at least. And that's if we could persuade the Conservatives of the need before we got to the meat of the accession talks. Otherwise, the EU would go, well, no, we're going to talk about this. There's no point, is there? Next election, you could just cancel the whole thing. That's a waste of our time. It could potentially be quicker to join this scheme, which doesn't even exist yet, than to take the path which does exist, but we're not currently allowed to travel. But finally, I will also just point out, this is why also people should take the political process more seriously. I keep saying to the point of tedium, it takes longer to build than destroy. It's true in politics as it is in physically building something. You cannot give the greediest, most unpatriotic government 14 years to do almost as they please and then expect to go, oh, that was a mistake. Oh, yeah, we'll put you in charge. Can you just fix everything now, please? If you put the country in the hands of people who have no familiarity with consequences, do not be surprised if they run the country as if there are no consequences for poor decisions. And if this goes back to the very birth of the EU itself, it was born out of a sense of wanting to take responsibility for 2 world wars erupting from Europe. Our forebears wanted to put an end to the cycle of wars, but they didn't wave a magic wand and bring peace. It took years to even get the basics worked out and then decades to build it all up. I hope it does not take us quite that long to rebuild from our folly, but I know for certain it won't be quick either. But, as I say, there is no harm in pushing politicians as if it could be done quickly, because it is the only way I see to getting a debate going, which most of the media shies away from, and one of the best ways to get politicians talking about it, get a leader of the opposition who wants to talk about it. So if you want to move Brexit along more quickly, maybe think about who you'd rather was setting the Brexit debate in opposition, the Lib Dems or the Conservatives, and think about voting accordingly. Tactical voting advice, of course, on stopthetories.vote. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.